Hi everyone, we're group one, consisting of Samantha Ash, Brett Auerbach, Nicole Flores, Sean Jones, and Lacey Zerner, and we'll be discussing multi-generation organizational motivation and morale. So let's get started. Currently, there are 4 generational divisions present in today's workforce, and these consist of traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials. And we can see that now the traditionalists are starting to move out of the workforce, making room for the newest generation, Generation Z. And based on the social, political, environmental, and emotional factors that are in play during each of their upbringings, this brings about a distinct set of characteristics and behaviors that constitute as who can be considered most productive in an organization and how to go about promoting success. But unfortunately, at times, these different beliefs and the presence of stigmas, stereotypes, and scrutinizing has the ability to diminish a level of motivation and morale in the entire organization. Though each operates under their own methods and each believe they have been successful, not all of them are preferred by other generations. So in order to ensure continued success of each of the individuals throughout these generational shifts, it's necessary for leaders to understand the factors that each generation views as most important in order to contribute to overall motivation and morale in the workplace. So with this knowledge, organizational leaders can promote and back ideas to encourage collaboration amongst the generations, which should, in fact, increase morale and motivation all around.
So now we are going to move on to defining and introducing the generations. And as Lacey said, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to focus on traditionalists, baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials, also known as Generation Y. So traditionalists were born before 1945. Baby boomers were between 1945 and 1964. Generation X were between 1965 and 1976, and millennials were between 1976 and 1995. And it's important to note that traditionalists are sort of leaving or have already left the workforce now, and they have been replaced by the new incoming workforce of Generation Z. So I guess the biggest differences, or what kind of defines them, are a couple of factors. So the factors that have made the most influence on these different generations through our research, we found that things such as parenting, technology, and economics are the driving factors that separate each generation. So for example, millennials are garnering a lot of attention due to the fact they are the largest growing and are the most populated in the workforce, and they are often associated with advanced technology. And another factor that has led to the key differences is the growing political relations and the growing global economy.
Baby boomers currently account for approximately 80 million employees in today's workforce. However, they are starting to retire. They are retiring at a later date due to stress over having funding to be able to retire. This causes a problem for millennials that are wanting to get promoted because we're not having the baby boomers retire as earlier as traditionalists typically retired. So baby boomers typically are not motivated by those individuals that need to be constantly reassured that they're doing a job well done. Baby boomers are more apt to believe in no news is good news and don't really need that constant reassurance from their management team. They actually prefer getting recognition from their peers that are working on the same level as them. So if a peer actually recognizes them, that they did a job well done, they take that as a bigger compliment than getting it from their manager. So the baby boomers generally believe that time and experience are solid paths and want to be promoted. That's really their motivation. They want to have higher paying jobs with a better title than those of their counterparts, such as millennials. As it becomes closer to 2020, baby boomers are going to typically retire and leave room for those millennials to come in. So it might be a good time to rethink current policies to motivate and promote staff in the future.
All right, so following the baby boomer generation is the Gen X generation. As noted before, that's those born from the mid-1960s to the early 1980s. From a sociological perspective, Gen Xers were among the first generation to be raised by dual-income households. And that's obviously from women entering the workforce for the first time that we've seen in history for the most part. Additionally, it's the first time or the first era when we saw an increase in divorce rates. They actually more than doubled compared to the baby boomer generation. So this single parent construction kind of led to an identity of self-reliance with many of our Gen Xers. And that self-reliance is obviously translated into the workplace. In addition to self-reliance, having gone through those experiences for the first time and how much it deviated from traditional norms during that time, it also built a sense of skepticism that also translates into the workforce. So because of this, that skepticism and self-reliance, although they were self-reliant, they sought peer mentoring a lot because it wasn't in the home for the first time. And that is absolutely translated into the workforce with Gen Xers. It's stated that more over anything that the Gen X culture, or Gen X generation, they are among the first to embrace many cultures related to race and ethnicity. And that's obviously related to them seeking peer support groups. And it's also has a lot to do with single parenting. Also, because of this and because of the skepticism, Gen Xers are less motivated by money and more motivated by work-family balance. If you were to look at divorce rates compared from the Gen X generation compared to baby boomers, the Gen X generation themselves now have significantly decreased the divorce rate compared to the baby boomers. So following Gen X is the millennial generation, which is obviously the most conversed at this point. So the millennial generation is arguably the most confident and the most technologically sound generation thus far in the workplace. It's often noted that the millennial generation is highly motivated by workplaces that allow them to hold on to their authentic selves. Meaning that they're less likely to tolerate workplaces that prevent them from expressing their true identities. In addition to that, millennials are more over anything known to question why, which is a very common statement about millennials. With the exception of always asking why, millennials also are very adept in adaptability and flexibility. So although we are less likely to tolerate unpleasant workplaces, we are flexible and we are adaptable. And this is likely believed to be because we've invested in our future more than any other generation. And quite frankly, it has a lot to do with student loans. So if you were to ask one, what motivates a millennial, it's really the desire for success in multiple forms, opposed to solely compensation, meaning that it's not just money that we put into consideration when assessing upward mobility in the workplace, we're also looking for upward mobility with quality of life as well. So that concludes the millennial generation.
Okay, so in conclusion, we've gone over the various types of generations, who's included in them, and what they prefer within a workplace. But we haven't exactly defined what workplace morale is and why it's so important. So workplace morale can simply be summed up by how a work culture is and the vibe that's going on within it, whether that's good or bad, the types of reward systems, the types of punishment systems, and how recognition and team bonding occurs within an organization. It's been shown in a variety of studies that when you have positive leadership with positive rewards and allowing employees to take on an active role in knowing information about a company and statistics and things of that nature, they're more than likely to find their work to be rewarding and positive and want to continue working for that company for multiple years and grow with that company as their career goes. The same goes if the opposite effect happens and you have negative leadership within an organization, you're not involving employees or considering their opinions as much, you'll see overall morale go down, and many good employees will leave substantial organizations to move to maybe that organization's competition simply because their morale may be extremely low and there may be no incentive for that employee to stay within that organization. So in order to create that wholesome workplace environment, it's recommended that team bonding exercises as well as open communication between leaders and subordinates and coworkers stay open. Now we're going to flip to a video by Dr. Mary Donahue, who is a social scientist with a focus in evolutionary psychology. And she's going to discuss the various generations and the workplaces they prefer, the environments that they prefer, and how these different generations are going to take on some different leadership roles. We thank you as Group 1 for this presentation, and we hope you enjoy the rest of our video.
When work sucks, it affects the rest of our life. 57% of our waking time is spent at work. Gallup tells us that 70% of us are disengaged from work. That's a whole lot of people whose lives have a large suckage component. I study why work sucks and what we can do about it. Specifically, I study generational communication and the new rules of engaging each generation at work. I study cohorts, not individuals at work. Bad communication is one of the reasons work sucks. In my research, I have found that if you improve communication between the generations at work, work sucks less because you've reduced the stress between the generations. Never before have we had grandparents working on the same team as children that are their grandchildren's age. Never before have we had tools at work that allow us to mess up communication as much as email, text, and social media. Because of technology, we have lost our ability to communicate generationally. We no longer see a face or hear a voice or feel the tension in the room. We sit at our screens and we type. Do you remember the world before ISIS? Do you remember Scuds on CNN? Do you remember your first Facebook post? Or maybe your first SMS? Or maybe you remember where you were when you heard JFK was killed. These questions prove key in my research. In my data, we found that great communicators understand that each generation responds differently to leadership and workplace technology. They know they're different, their leaders and followers are different, and they're motivated differently, and that their job is to shift to meet the needs of each generation to manage up and manage down. I'm going to teach you the new rules of engagement, but before I do, let's review the generations, understanding that each academic institution has their own views on birth years. Boomers, born before 1960. We call them builders. Gen X, 1960, 1980. They're the doers. Millennials, 1980 to 2000, the adapters. And Gen Z, 2000 on, they're just brilliant. My friend Donna is a boomer. Her driver is legacy creation. Boomers are builders, and they are still tinkering. Donna's driver is legacy creation because as a child, she was deeply affected by the Cuban Missile Crisis as well as the threat of the bomb. She remembers hiding underneath her desk, and she can very clearly tell you where she was when she heard JFK was shot. Boomers are the architects of today's millennial. They've built the corporations, the bureaucracies, our volunteer structures. Boomers have been working their entire lives and have absolutely no intention of quitting. Ask Donna, she'll tell you, what would I do? Boomers process information from leaders and coworkers in an auditory capacity, meaning boomers are conversation clever. They think in terms of words. Boomers love word-based entertainment. Think about all their old James Bond movies, how the clever conversation played a role. Think about James in that famous line, "Does the collar match the cuffs?" You have to be listening pretty carefully to know what James meant exactly by that. We know from the VAC system that when people process information in an auditory capacity, they move their eyes to the right when they're remembering or to the left when they're constructing a solution. And why auditory for boomers? Because when they were coming of age, language ruled. In high school, they were taught Latin, debate, humanities. As they were coming of age, the world was auditory. There was newspapers, radio ruled, and debates were based on fact, logic. I know I'm frustrating Donna when she says to me, "Can you get off that thing?" She's talking about my phone. "Pick up your head, I need to talk to you, listen to me." I know she's getting stressed because I'm not allowing her to share her legacy with me. When boomers like Donna get into distress, do 3 things. Number 1, acknowledge their legacy. Boomers have and will continue to be great friends, coworkers, and parents. Number 2, use auditory sentence patterning. So I hear what you're saying is, so what I'm hearing is. And number 3, allow them to talk things out. Allow them to write long, detailed emails. Talking is a boomer soother. That's how they built their legacy. How they love it. They love it so much they came up with that rule, don't go to bed mad, stay up all night, talk it out, but don't go to bed. This is not the best way to deal with a situation. If you are dealing with a Gen Xer, we're too damn tired from working to stay up all night and talk. Gen Xers like my friend Trish and I are doers. Our drivers are money, work, and the fear of losing it. We're independent, we're entrepreneurial, but we're all suffering from the Prince Charles syndrome. We're waiting for somebody older to leave so we can finally take charge and make some changes. Gen X is the TV generation. We grew up with it, we love it. TV dinners, TV tables, in university, TV dates, and it all began with Disney. Oh yeah, most of us can remember sitting there with our parents, eating our dinner, watching Disney, Saturday morning cartoons with Tang. We process information visually. When we're thinking or remembering, our eyes go up and to the right. And when we're constructing a solution, our eyes go to the left. Where boomers love language, we love pictures. And now we begin to see where the stress is starting to occur. We're not conversation clever. When we went to high school, there was no money for language, for humanities, for debate. When we graduated from university, we graduated into recession, not to jobs. We graduated into mass layoffs. We graduated with student debt at an interest rate of 12%. Last hired, first fired, last invited into management. There was always this theme, do more with less, and it's never more evident than in our entertainment. Think about Bruce Willis in any Die Hard movie. He may not have had the witty repartee of James Bond, but he saved the world 1,000 times doing more with less without any gadgets or even Mr. Bond's cue. Gen X are truly engaged when they have one of their inevitable notebooks. They love their notebooks. They love technology, except for that very, very, very brief Shift F7, lose your data. We love pictures and technology so much we created PowerPoint. Sorry. Give a Gen Xer a deck or a whiteboard and some markers, and that's their soother. They can make sense of the world with pictures. You know a Gen X is going into distress when you see the inevitable Gen X slump. Their eyes go to the right. Most likely they're thinking about LinkedIn, who's going to hire them. Or to the left, they're constructing their exit strategy. Then they sit in a meeting and they don't get mad. They just wait. And finally, they'll take everything on. They'll do it. Times may be tight. Everybody's frustrated, but they'll get it done. They're the toughest. If you want to re-engage a Gen X, do two things. Engage in visual sentence patterning. I'm not clear on what you're saying. Can you provide more detail? And number two, because you know their fear is losing work, stress, money, ask them to identify this fear. Ask them to give you a deck. They'll love it. Gen X are great at providing information on their own and giving it to you. We don't understand when people can't think for themselves. Millennials frustrate the hell out of us. Millennials are the great adapt, adopt, and improve generation, and they're having a heck of a time living in a boomer-centric world. My friend Sam is one of my very favorite millennials. His driver is development. His whole entire life has been a series of developmental activities with imposed structure. Sam is also one of the most loved generation. Sam's parents loved, some say coddled him. Sam's parents loved him so much, they had a bumper sticker put on the back of their car that said, "Precious baby on board." Unlike Gen X, who was tossed outside, told to come in if the streetlights come on, Sam was the first generation to have play dates instead of play time. Unlike Gen X, where competition ruled at school, at Sam's time, teaching changed to a focus on self-esteem. Sam's parents set his schedule, organized his world. Sam can clearly remember a chart on the fridge that was color-coded, talking about who was where and when. Sam's parents both worked. Jobs were posted on the fridge. Cooking instructions were posted on the fridge. No surprise then that he does really well with detail and structure, but not in a traditional environment. Sam's parents were his rock as he was growing up, and he would have it no other way. His childhood was fairly peaceful, prosperous, but it was when he was coming of age that the world started falling apart. Think about 2008. Presidents lied, prime ministers lied, bankers lied, college and university presidents lied. No one went to jail. That's why they don't trust. Why would you when you know what's going to happen? They trust their friends, they trust their coworkers, they trust their parents. And look at what they've created. Glassdoor, Rate My Professor, Yelp. They share everything. They're fully transparent. Sam's been online since the 5th grade. He grew up in the internet and with and on Facebook. He shares everything. He's fearless. He loves technology. He and his friends have done some amazing things with it. And, his rebels he loves. Ferris Bueller, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. This love of of just rebels fuels his desire for actions. He doesn't think in terms of words or pictures. He thinks in terms of actions. After all, the internet is action-based. He processes information from leaders and coworkers at work in terms of actions, kinesthetically, meaning his head goes down and to the right when he's remembering or down and to the left when he's constructing a solution. When Sam is choosing his entertainment, he creates it using technology because he loves to play with technology. And look what he's done. YouTube, sexting, thank you for that, by the way. Look at how he's recreated and adopted Uber, Uber, and Airbnb. Again, thank you. I can always tell when Sam's starting to get stressed out because he gets really fidgety. And he doesn't really want to look me in the eye because he's processing information. And no, he's not reaching for his phone. He's going to the right or going to the left. Okay, and then he reaches for his phone. When Sam starts to go into distress, there's 3 things you do. First, ask his opinion. His parents always did. He was considered an equal. Number 2, provide the proverbial chart on the fridge. Give him structure, give him detail, and get him to question why. Their thirst for knowledge is amazing. And then number 3, don't ask him to work in a traditional 9-to-5 environment. Tell him what you want, get him to adopt it, and my God, he'll improve it. It's within his DNA to do that. But it's within the DNA of his younger brothers and sisters, Gen Z, to change the entire world. Gen Z, like my baby daughter, fear being alone. They're the first generation to grow up in technology. They're also the first generation to grow up with mass murder of neighbors by neighbors, as well as the threat of global terrorism. Like the boomers before them, who hid under their desk, this generation has never gone into school without knowing how to go into lockdown. They travel in packs. They're never without their phones. Long conversations stress them. They have 3-minute YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. When they're stressed, they need their phone. They reach for their phone to connect to other people. Because when they were little and they cried, they were given a phone, an iPad, or a computer. Technology is their soother. So I've probably overwhelmed you. No worries. There's an easy way to remember all of this. Next time you're typing, texting, or talking with somebody at work, take a step back and say, I'm different. I'm a builder, a doer, and an adapter. Take a step forward and say they're different. They're visual, they're auditory, they're kinesthetic. Take a step to the right and a step to the left and say their soothers are different. Talking, drawing, playing, technology. Okay, stand up, let's try it. Stand up, really. Awesome. So take a step back and say, I'm different. Nice. Take a step forward and say, they're different. Take a step to the right and a step to the left and say, I'll react differently. You have just done the generational boogie. Remember that. Next time work sucks.